you can't connect the dots looking forward, but you can only connect them looking backward.
Over these past few months, we've sat across from 4 extraordinary leaders: Surya, Susan, Sailaja, and Sari, who have redefined what it means to lead, to heal, and to grow. And today, Piyush and I wanted to press the pause button and look at the tapestry we have been weaving together.
This is a special episode of the OKR. No guests today, just a reflection on the voices that have shaped our first chapter. I'm Piyush Dixit.
And I am Eric Lee James. Today, we recollect their origins to find the clarity of our own growth. When I look back at our conversations with Sari and Sai, I see a mirror of our own corporate lives. Both of them were insiders, directors, and heads of HR who realized the system needed a human heart.
That's true, Eric. I was struck by Sari's approach of not knowing and jumping in, and it worked for her phenomenally. My personal learning that I got was about ego states when she spoke. And now, for a while now, I catch myself in meetings realizing when I have slipped into either over adapting to something that's going on or sometimes rebelling, especially when I'm under stress of what's going on in that context.
How did your understanding of ego states, the idea of how we show up as a parent, an adult, or a child, change? And how have you handled a high pressure corporate crisis?
Well, that's 2 different questions, Eric. I was running my own company for 5 years, and since I was 21. And then at 26, I got headhunted to become a director in KLM. And my first job there was to set up corporate learning, so worldwide. So I was very young and very cocky, I think. I a bit like Pippi Longstocking. You know, Pippi Longstocking says, "I haven't done it yet, so I don't know. It's not possible." So it's a bit like that. So I didn't know it wasn't possible at 26 to be a director in KLM and to be just underneath the board. So I just did it. And from KLM, I went on to EMI Music, and then I went on to ASML Semiconductors, and I ended up in Shell. Yes, that's. And often I was the only woman and the youngest in that kind of setting, really board -1 setting. A secret agent, yes, in certain sense, because, nominally I was given a title like, I don't know, global talent manager or, corporate development or something like that. But most often they recruited me to do big change projects. So in that sense, yes, I was a secret agent. If you're a secret agent and you're an internal radical change manager, you have a sell-by date. You make the change and then somebody else takes over to make it calm again. And I think my international upbringing and really young vision on dynamics and how people work really helped in that. But it also had a deep influence on, I think, you get a certain perspective if you're hired all the time to do change. It was only later in my career that I really started managing sustainable teaming, because that wasn't the request I got at the time. How do we show up as parent, adult, child in these high pressure corporate crises? Well, people pretend to be adults, Eric, I think. And we try to manage the stress, and then there's a lot of rules around. I think what kept me sane really in that period, because it was very high pressure, and being the youngest and the only woman usually in that position, you get a lot of transference and a lot of misunderstandings. What really kept me sane is I used to work, from 8 to 6 or 7 in corporate land, and then I'd go home and I'd run my dance school. So I was dancing salsa from 8 to midnight and getting up at 6 again the next morning for years and years. And I think probably that's the secret, that you keep somewhere a place where your child ego state has free reign and can get nurtured, to play.
Mm.
But the other answer, if I may, to that is that I very quickly realized that corporate life was all a game. So, in the sense of homo ludens, play, people were so I would be in really high flying meetings with millions of euros of budget, and then I'd think these people are just playing to meet corporate directors. And if you see it as play, of course it's really serious business, but it's also, it's not your own money. It's not their own money. And I was always very clear about contracting while I was doing it, but not many people are in corporate life. So that's certainly something we can teach them.
And Sari, she brought that strong spine and open heart. For me,
yes.
that was a huge moment of growth. I still have goosebumps from the songs that I heard that day. I used to think leadership was about the spine, the logic, the results, the data, all of that. Sai showed me that without the heart, the spine eventually breaks under the weight of the work. So, Piyush, what stayed with us?
I think, see, what you said about Sai strikes me as very real. It's a polarity that all of us need to look at, versus going with this rational, purely results-based, outcome-based. Yeah, you're right about that. So professional success without personal okayness is just hollow. I can feel the hollowness. I remember feeling it when something would get achieved, but there is almost an unacceptable personal cost to it. Yeah.
Needing a strong spine and an open heart. And I think that is a quote that I picked up from, I think, your book. And senior leaders often pride themselves on being very purely rational, very analytical, very rational, etc. And from a TA perspective, what is the origin of that mask? What are they usually hiding behind the analytical or a data-driven story?
There are really many angles to this, and let me attempt to be coherent as I uncover those. In India, just like many other parts of the world, a lot of leaders at the top are men. Right? We have a problem in that space of women in leadership. So a lot of them are men, and if you look at how men are socialized, not just in India, but even in other parts of the world, we are socialized to wear our armor, go out there. It's like war. I mean, this is the terminology, even in corporate India as elsewhere. This is the kind of terminology. Yeah? You're at war. You're playing a game. And when you're playing a game, you wear enough protection if you're in a rough game. So you see, if this is the socializing, and so the rational becomes the automatic place to lean into, thinking that the mind is everything. The other angle is also in India, the many years of colonial history that we have, and therefore the education system in our country is very much leaning to the mind, very much leaning to the idea that you build that, you problem solve with that, and that is the be all and end all of all what you may do as a leader. You think through things. Yeah. I cannot imagine too many male leaders saying, oh, let me feel through this and find a solution. Yeah, so that's just not language that comes. But we understand in TA that good problem solving needs thinking and feeling, right? You think about your feelings, you feel about your thinking. And it is through this toggling that you really arrive at what is necessary and needs to be done. So I think when I go back to, therefore, what is this whole leaning to rationality? I think this is what it is, right? And it's a little different with women. We don't only lean into rationality. We have tremendous permission to also lean into emotion. Again, because of how our social roles are, how we are socialized, there's a lot of permission for that. And therefore, I think we will apply ourselves to problem solving in a very different way. And so strong spine and open heart comes from this sort of place, Eric. Yeah, which is, of course, there is a great need to have a strong spine, to be a fantastic doer, and to know how to be a force in yourself and courageously move forward, which is what leadership is all about. Yeah, where we have to have that because we're dealing with so much ambiguity. We don't even know the path forward. We can't even see the path forward many, many times. It's so complex. So yes, the strong spine, very, very valuable. But to think that only a strong spine is what is going to take you forward and upward in your leadership, I think that's the piece that I wanted to challenge, right? And to know that in the times that we're leading in, more than ever, both of these aspects are very, very vital, because we have moved away from the whole industrial approach to command and control. We are working across the globe, distributed teams. We are needing to be heavy on collaboration. We're needing to dip deep into our creative archives in ourselves for the sake of innovation today. We are dealing with such severe diversity related questions in corporate, but also even just in the world. So how would we face any of that without a heart, without us being able to lean into also an emotional side, lean into the powerful values of care and love and empathy and being relational, right? I cannot see a way forward without it. So I think it's an imperative to actually have these two. And that's really how it has become such a core of the work that I do, both with women as well as with male leaders.
If we now look at what Susan shared and Surya shared, these were conversations that felt like they were tapping into the soil of TA community, the fertilizers of how the TA community actually developed.
Mm. And Susan's focus on the internal parent and the scripts we inherit really hit home for me. I have been reflecting on the compliance script many of us grow with. I am a very, very strong adapted child. So that hit home for me too. Susan's wisdom helped me see that autonomy isn't about rebelling, it's about making a conscious choice in the here and now.
Yes, Eric, talk about adapted child. I remember discovering my own internal parent and my own script early during the learnings phase of TA and realizing that being quote unquote mature is what adapted child makes you look like. And very little or nothing about the conscious choice in the here and now that you mentioned. So yes, certainly autonomy is really worthwhile, and you realize that you are being over compliant only when you start looking from a slightly different lens. If you see, of our listeners, among them organizational leaders, and wondering for a senior leader who's wrestling with complex org challenges, and maybe in educational institution, teachers, how can this TA lens, particularly by understanding the origins of their team's dynamics, truly make a difference in their leadership and in their context?
Problems and conflicts, whether between individuals or in the organization as a whole, is a given. And I think there is no organization anywhere that I have come across where it does not exist. This is because all of us discount. And discounting is necessary sometimes for us to just exist. For example, at a given moment, there are thousands of stimuli coming to me. And if I were to process all of them, I would just go mad. No? And therefore, inbuilt, we have certain survival strategies by which we discount. However, sometimes we are discounting important aspects of reality, namely ourselves, the other, or the situation. And this leads to problems, whether it is with individuals or in organization. These discounts are influenced by individual scripts and also the scripts and beliefs of leaders and founders of organizations. So there is very often an interlock between individual scripts and organizational scripts. Sometimes people who have a completely different script get thrown out. Sometimes some of them start bringing in change. But this change can happen only if they work alongside the existing script. Like we look at the martial arts, it's not about fighting against something. It's about using the power of the existing structure to make the change by adding our structure. And TA gives us those tools because it gives us tools to analyze ourselves, it gives us tools to analyze the system, and helps us see how can we integrate this for the greater good of the organization in the given system. I remember I was invited to a company where a new CEO was brought in to a family-run company. And along with him, he had brought in some people from his previous company. And there was this struggle between those who had been donkey number of years in that company and the new people, because those who were there already believed that these new people have been brought in to replace them, though this was not the intention. And this caused the struggle. This coupled with the family way of working and the MBA way of working in conflict was the problem. So I was called in to run a program to bring peace between these groups. And we had a 2-day program on the beach And I taught them strokes. Okay. And we had this beautiful session, and they learned so much about communication and strokes and so on and so forth. In the evening, the MD of the company came in. He had come with a plan of doing a lot of official work in the night. I had left. And next day morning, when I went there, I don't know what you did to them, but they were all in such high spirits and was so bonded with each other. I realized bringing in my work would only spoil it. So I did not do that. We just enjoyed the time on the beach. I said, thank you for doing that. Next day morning, he was seated there, and I said, now you have come into this group and we have already formed. Therefore, it's important that we do something for you to integrate. And without knowing that I had taught strokes, this person said, I'll start. And he went around the whole circle, complimenting everybody, even remembering the time when he had interviewed them.
Oh,
And to one person, he even said, you're spending too much time for the organization. You should spend more time with your family. And that, I would say, is the Almighty's provision, that this person showed strokes in action without knowing that I had taught the topic.
wow.
And that is how change happens in an organization. When the will to bring about change is there, it manifests. And TA gives us lots of tools to create this manifestation.
Wow, that is a wonderful story, Susan. And I like the story of the beach when there was chaos and there's some is calm. And I have also noticed a lot of MDs who bring in work during a training workshop. For him to resist itself is telling something about what people felt in that workshop. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And this is someone at crossroads, perhaps a 40-year-old rethinking about their life's journey. What unique insights can TA provide for understanding their personal script and deciding their next chapter?
I did my TA 101 at 41.
Yes.
And from then on, my life has taken a new meaning. It was also at the time that I had just lost my father. And I was wondering, I had spent 14 years looking after my parents, and I was wondering, what do I do with myself? And that's when I met TA, and that made a big change. Later, I learned anthroposophy, and I think this 42 has a very significant meaning in anthroposophy. Rudolf Steiner says, before 42, life largely shapes you. At 42, you begin to shape life.
Wow.
From within. Up to around 42, people are largely shaped by outer life, ambitions, and the development of the personality in the world. How do I influence the world? By reaching my goals. After 42, there is a turning inward, a growing need for meaning, wisdom, and spiritual orientation. This may be up there in front of some people. Some, it may not be obvious, but we are naturally wired for that. And TA gives us tools to grow this search for wisdom.
So with Surya, he's such a master of co-creation. His belief in collaboration over solo acting is such a core part of what he models. And he reminded me, and I tend to have that difficulty of going it alone, that we do not have to carry the weight of being the expert alone. We grow better when we grow together. And this podcast is in part really evidence of that between you and me, Eric. I think so much comes up when you work together. So what stayed with us here, I think the power of community and the fact that autonomy is a relational act. It's not a lonely one just by an individual. Yeah. What really impacted was realizing how much of daily behavior is actually borrowed from our cultural and parental origins, and you don't see that borrowing until you start playing it out and you spend a moment reflecting, setting aside, and looking at what really happened there. Was it me, or was it somebody else from within me that was talking to what was going on?
I was also reflecting on my PTSD and my CTA journey. And I was just talking to you, Piyush, and a couple of my friends who were with me in the journey. And, the quote that Surya always mentions, it really, really takes a village to get to wherever we're getting to. My own growth, my support from my family, support from my peers, knowingly or unknowingly, the questions they ask, the reflections that they have given. I think it's such a power of the community, which I look forward to, and the okayness that the community gives in whatever ways that they can give. I think that leads to my own growth and the growth of this podcast as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we are learning to co-create more and more openly, leaning on each other's humanness, so to say, instead of trying to solve everything in isolation. And it really feels such a relief and such a joy to have this partnership among us in humanness itself.
And almost about 6 years after I finished my graduation, suddenly one fine morning, a friend of mine said, "There's a TA conference happening in Chennai. Would you like to come?" I said, "TA." It immediately struck a chord. I said, I didn't even think twice. I said, "Yes, definitely, I would like to go." So that was my real interaction with the TA community. The strength of transactional analysis, at least in India, even globally, is the community of people who really practice. So I went to the conference. There I met a lot of people. And that is where I saw Father George. I did not meet sense because at that time it was an Indian conference, but a lot of international transactional experts were there. And Father George, of course, was one of the major organizers. So I saw him, didn't meet him, but I met several others. Father George is one of the first trainees, PK Saru, which whom all of you are familiar with. I met her. But I didn't know much about her. Even though we lived in the same city, I got to know about it much later. So that is how I got introduced. When that 5 days of conference was something mind-boggling again. I don't remember anything, but the whole experience was so revealing and so insightful. At the end of one of the workshops, I remember I went up to the speaker and asked her, Julie Hay, she's a renowned transactionalist from the UK. I asked her if I want to study more about it, how do I come to know it? So she then introduced me to Saru, who happened to be living in the same city as mine in Coimbatore. It's a series of accidents that really got me into the TA community. Even before that, my friend's uncle hosting the conference and she inviting me to the conference, me meeting Julie. And Julie happened to be a friend of Saru and living at her house in Coimbatore. Who would believe somebody from UK coming and staying with a friend in Coimbatore, where I also live? It was quite a fascinating thing for me, actually, because I never get tired talking about my experience with the TA community because much of the energy comes from the community and the experience. It's so generous. I always tell people ask me, why do you volunteer for so many works? Because right from 2001, I took up my engagement with formal roles in the international TA community, and of course, little earlier in our own community. My only thing is I've got so much from this community. People just supported and helped and gave their time and themselves for so many years. And it's a small way we have to giving back. I learned as conscious reciprocity.
I think it's such a power of the community, which I look forward to, and the okayness that the community gives in whatever ways that they can give. I think that leads to my own growth and the growth of this podcast as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we are learning to co-create more and more openly, leaning on each other's human OS, so to say, instead of trying to solve everything in isolation. And it really feels such a relief and such a joy to have this partnership among us in human OS itself.
So, Piyush, we've spent 4 episodes asking others about their origins. I want to ask you one. What is the origin of your need to create this podcast? When did you first realize that your own human OS needed a space like the OK air to breathe?
Very interesting question. Uh, so I recall something we need to do to share this, to get to the wider community, to enable others like we've been enabled. It feels selfish to not do that. So you brought up the idea of the podcast. We met several people. How should we do it? How complex the technology, all of that. Honestly, initially I thought, wow, this is such a tough one to go to. Maybe we should do something else. But thanks to your quiet persistence, I really loved it and never looked back. It's simply powerful. There is a sense of kind of fulfillment, and I long to hear. Sometimes I long to hear from the listeners what this means for them.
I see this community thrive, and we find so many transaction analysts actually working in organizations, in corporates, and in schools and colleges, where they find more structured ways of being effective, being enabled, and actually pursue their dreams. So that is my story. And for me, a large part of that wish is come from what TA and learning from all of you has enabled for me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In fact, sometimes I regret why didn't this happen many years earlier to me in my own leadership journey. It would have been so much enriched. Uh, and it's still, like you said, it still continues to. Uh, so not valuing yourself in that corporate world, losing yourself in making sure that something that is needed around you must happen and you have to comply with that. So many years of that, and only when that realization started coming is when the shift happened. And thanks to TA, the first year of TA, I was still working and seeing what was going on, and I realized it's time to switch. So that's really what helped me move out of that context and start pursuing something far, far, far more joyful.
Most important thing happening in these episodes isn't the theory, it's the resonance. What one person says, I am okay, it gives everyone else in the air permission to be okay too.
Yeah, so true to the theme of the OK air, and that's the air we would like to spread as much as possible. That's where it begins. So, where do we go from here? We've looked at these four foundational pillars of TA.
Now we continue the journey. We have to hear more voices to hear, more guests, and more origins to trace. And somehow I feel that we are detectives finding journeys, tracing back origins. And in some of the podcasts that I've been talking to, and some of the podcast guests that I've been talking to, you see so much joy light up in their eyes when they speak about their stories and their reminiscence, some of their journeys that have led to. But for today, we just wanted to say thank you to Surya, Susan, Sari, and Sailaja for letting us into their worlds.
And certainly, thanks to you, our listeners. You are part of this ecosystem that we're trying to create with the OKR. We really, really would love to know what hit home for you.
So until next time, I am Eric Lee James.
And I'm Piyush Dixit. Keep seeking the origins, keep pressing the pause button, and remember the OKR.
Okay.